this meeting of December 14th, 2020 to order. And let's have a roll call, please.
Director Raddock.
Here.
Director Dye.
Here.
Director Lohman.
Here.
Director Penrose.
Here.
Director Clark. Director Clark.
He's here.
I know, he's muted, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, he's not muted.
He's not muted.
The question is whether he can hear you or not. That's an issue.
We can read his lips. Does that count for handicap?
Matthew, are you here? Do this if you're here.
Chair Slater Carter.
Present.
Okay.
Oh, I heard him.
Okay.
Yeah, hold on.
Okay, moving on to public comment, oral communication. I don't see anybody who has who isn't here for a specific agenda item. Anybody want to wave their hand on this? Barbara, I love the pink flamingos behind you.
Kenya. No, Tanzania.
Oh, nice. Okay, let's move on then to the consent agenda. There are 3 items. Approve the minutes of November 9th, 2020. Approve the disbursements for December 14, 2020. And monthly review and expense report for period ending October 31, 2020. Discussion, motion, second.
I move to accept the consent agenda.
Thank you, Deborah Penrose.
Second.
That was second from Deborah Ruddick?
Yep.
Oh, good.
I just want to say I like the new reporting. It's really helpful to be able to look at this and see the numbers of the way they've presented them. It's really great. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's all come from the Finance Committee and feedback from all your members.
Thank you. All right. Motion to approve. Roll call vote, please.
Director Raddock.
Yes.
Director Dye.
Yes.
Director Lohman.
Yes.
Director Penrose.
Yes.
Director Clark.
Aye.
Chair Slater Carter.
Aye.
Motion approved.
All right. Wow. We are moving right along here, 5 minutes into the meeting, and we're to regular business. Item 1A, review and receive the financial report for Q1 of fiscal year 2021, budget versus actual, and there is an attachment.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was talking about is, thank you. I think it's great, but I like them both.
I agree. This format's much better.
Yeah.
Okay. So coming to the agenda item, this is the first time that we're bringing in the Q1 financial report for the fiscal year 2021. This was discussed in the Finance Committee meeting, and based on feedback and comments from the Finance Committee members, we have made a slight change, and Peter Medina from Maze Consulting will be giving a short PowerPoint, and we can then go for questions, if any. So Peter, I will allow you to share your screen. You can go ahead and start your PowerPoint, please. Yeah, before we get there, Chair Slater Carter, Michelle Dragoni had trouble with the link, so I sent it to her. She's just joined in, so maybe after this agenda item, we can check if there is a public comment.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Unmute. Okay, thank you, Kishan. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, good evening. As Kishan said, we have gone through this presentation in its original form with the Finance Committee a month back. This is our attempt to keep the board and the Finance Committee appraised of the current situation of the district finances on and a more of a give some feedback and more of a formal review outside of the monthly consent agenda items for the previous month. So I will start off by saying this, thank you to staff, George and Kishan, huge thank you to George. This process, I think, has brought our finance committee very close together in terms of this. In reality, we've been with you guys for a year now, but this is our first beginning of a fiscal year. We've caught the tail end of the 2 previous fiscal years in the audit process, and we've gotten through those processes, but we haven't got to take a fiscal year from the beginning, from the budget process, and take it all the way through. Through this process, what we have discovered are a number of reporting mechanisms within Tyler that have not been looked at in a number of fiscal years, and some things that can just be upgraded overall. So I said that this has been a wonderful process for us as a team to kind of take a deep dive in a couple of different areas. And with input by the finance committee, it has caused us to, take a couple different deviations from that deep dive, but still, I mean, we were pretty deep. So with that, I will go into the presentation. You have the board packet. And so this is going to be a bit different, but more or less just a different viewpoint of various graphs of where we are a quarter way through the current fiscal year. Yes, I'll jump that and I'll take it to somewhere else later. Okay, so going on, purpose. Wanting to display the current operations of the authority 3 months through the current fiscal year. Want to keep you guys apprised of where we are at, and give it to you, show you guys in a viewpoint of what we believe you are most comfortable with, and that being the audit perspective. So Tyler itself has said we have thousands of counts in there, and we've talked about this in the finance committee as well. It makes budgeting and bookkeeping a bit of a challenge. So we know this, but when we condense it down, page 2 of your board packet kind of shows that viewpoint of the audit. We have our revenue, our operations, in 3 categories: the O&M, collections, and other income. We also have our interest, our non-operating, and then we have our below the line capital contributions. So that's a viewpoint we want to begin showing it to you, and then from there we can use a number of graphs. So that's what you're going to see. So overall, really what we're seeing is that revenues and expenses in our general fund, which is basically all operations outside of the collections budget, are tracking extremely well. We're at 25% of each. The O&M, there are no current fiscal year late payments from any of the member agencies as of September 30th. So I said that piece is going extremely well. And for collections as well as capital assessments, the same. For the expense wise, we have our 5 categories which we're using: treatment, collections, lab, admin, and infrastructure. Within then we have some variances, not all at 25%, but when combined, they are all at 25%. The collections budget is under budget by about 9%. As I said, as I led with, we've gone into a pretty deep dive on collections. George and Jesse really have done a really good job here, but we found out some automatic entries which were set up, I would say probably when Tyler was first enacted, are no longer current with the budget and the current budget format. So we've identified those errors, and we will begin to reallocate that beginning in Q2 and Q3. What's the major thing you'll see is that in your board packet, page 2, treatment expenses, which are currently over budget by 4%, are going to come down to collections, and that's due to direct time spent by our collections staff, which is currently automatically set to be captured in the general fund, which is not correct, and there has to be a manual allocation being done. So that's what the major change you'll see in the Q2 report and going forward. But we wouldn't have known that without us going through this process. So this has been good. So like I said, general fund, we are tracking 25%, really good. Collections just right on point too, as well in terms of the revenue piece. A little bit behind for expenditures, but as I've explained, that will change. This is going through and really just showing the same graph in our dollar format at 25%. This is all three member agencies for the revenue and for the expenses. Okay. These are our 4 different categories of income. So our capital contributions and the O&M, this is our member agency money. That is right on point. Other income is, these are our member agency pass-through as well as NCEPF funding. I probably have a couple of those letters wrong. I apologize for that. Is that funny? And that's a little bit over budget, mainly because of the member agency pass-through. Okay. So here said we show, I move my screen so I can see what I'm seeing. Okay, yeah, so once again, all at 25%, these are our adopted budget figures, and then how we're tracking through the current year actuals through September 30th, all in revenue. Okay, for our expenses, this is kind of the recreation of page 2 of your board packet. Infrastructure, administration, lab, and treatment. Like I said, individually, we're off a bit. Collectively, we're at 25%. The over budget for admin mainly is due here is because of a number of our expenditures are paid in one-time fees. For example, Tyler, we pay that for the full year. So it's a large expense at the beginning of the fiscal year that dissipates as the year moves forward. And we also have that for audit costs for our professional fees. That's higher because since we've gone through 3 audits this current calendar year, and those have been captured in terms of the expenses during this period. So that's the main piece there. And it's on page 3 of your board packet. There'll be further explanations for other variances. Going on, so we show here once again a different perspective of just our adopted budget and our actual through September 30th. We move in here to collections. This is basically showing that all member agencies are current. We're at 25%. GCSD is a bit over, same with Half Moon Bay, just the way the numbers fell out, 26, 26, and 25%. And here we go. For the dollar amounts, these are our monthly allocations. Bills are being prepared and issued, and we're getting money back from the member agencies without issue. So this is wonderful stuff. With that, I will turn it over to various questions that may come up. But and once again, thank you to the Finance Committee for going with us on this process and giving us the feedback that we needed to tighten this up and fix some issues that we had not known about.
Barbara.
I wanted to go back 3 slides.
Okay. Pardon. Did I go too many?
Nope. One more.
One more back?
Back.
Or forward? No? Okay. Here, let me start from the beginning.
There are numbers.
No.
There are numbers on the slides.
Okay, I'm sorry. I should have looked at the number. Keep going. Keep going. I think it's that one. Back up one. Yeah, this one. One more. There we go.
Back to 6.
I think it would be good when you look at this one, it looks as if the actual is way under budget. And when I first looked at it, it took me a minute. But that's because we're only at 25% of the year, right? So is there a way when you're doing this kind of slide to make it clear that this is actually what would be expected at this point? I mean,
yes, yes. I believe the PowerPoint does not do it. Right. No, I think the PowerPoint doesn't do as good of a job of that as the board packet does, because I said that page 2 there kind of lays it out as far as current first 3 months, year-to-date budget. We have our total budget. And then we have our various variances based on year-to-date as well as current, because what we're expecting at year to date is 25% across the board. I mean, so overall we're there, but I agree with you. Yes, we do not show that very well here.
Note on it that
Some of
says
these slides.
expected result is 25% of budget or something like that.
Right. No, I should have prefaced it that 25%. If you see that number littered throughout this PowerPoint, we're doing well.
Right. But I mean, if we're producing reports, I'd like to see a report that just says the expected percent would be 25%, just so that I understand what you're saying completely. I'm just saying that let's have charts that don't make us look like we're way under budget.
Yeah.
Understood.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
I think the whole presentation is great.
Good. Any other questions from the board? Looking for hands waving. Should I put on and look for hands? I have a question. Why is our other income on that slide we just looked at 41% when it should be at 25%? Do we get some payments earlier in the year and then towards the middle in the next one, it'll be less, and by the end of the year, we'll be at 100%?
Let me give you the exact. So a big part of this is from NDWSCP. This represents about $28,000 of what that income. We have permit fees, trucked waste, and leachate. And leachate. Sorry. Leachate. Oh gosh. Well,
it's not French.
I was trying to put a little bit of pizzazz on it. But then we have pass-through costs. What I said, these are from the member agencies. So the one that I'm mostly familiar with is Montera. There are costs that are for lift station repairs that are borne by SAM, but that do get passed through to the member agencies. And that is what's going on here. They've incurred costs. Okay. And they've issued for reimbursement, and that has been paid. We book it as other income, and we do not book a contra expense, which is something that we've tossed around. But like I said, I like to see the whole numbers, both revenue and expense. We get to the same point bottom line, but I like to see the numbers in whole. So we'll see these variances for the other income portions.
Thank you. Any more questions? I don't see any hands waving. I'm sorry, is this an action item or a information item?
Receive and file.
File and receive.
File and receive.
Receive and
well,
file.
I'd like to say I have been asking for this at SAM and MWSD since I first saw it done at the fire department 10 years ago. And I'm really glad to see it done. I think for transparency, for the general public to be able to look at our books quickly and see if we're on track, I think this is very important. And I am sure this will grow and change with time, but this is a heck of a good start. And Keishan and Peter and George, and Susie and everyone else involved in the filing and the finance and everything. Thank you very much. I think this is a big step forward for SAM. And I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes.
And so we are received, I guess. We don't need a vote to receive it. Did everybody see it? Yes?
Receive and file requires a vote.
It does. Okay. Yeah. Let's have a motion and a second then.
So moved.
Thank you. And the second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Director Radak?
Yes.
Director Dye?
Yes.
Director Lohman?
Rick.
Director Penrose?
Yes.
Director Clark?
Aye.
Chair Slater Carter?
Aye.
Motion passed.
Okay, the next item, B, and I'm not sure if there was a typo. I should have called you on this, Keishan. Information and update to the Board of Directors regarding the wastewater treatment process upset. That's not an update. It's talking about the treatment problem we had, right? So it is an upset.
It is an upset, yes.
Okay. Well said. Thank you.
Okay. So as we mentioned in the last board meeting, I gave you the gist of what was going on and the problems being faced at the plant. Now, I'm glad to inform the board and everyone that the plant process is doing much better now, seems to be improving. And we are getting weird numbers, high numbers from the surrounding areas. I would say that we've got some high numbers from Half Moon Bay as well as from Princeton. And as indicated in the last meeting, our normal influent BODs is about 300 to 350 in the past, but now we are getting way high. For example, from Half Moon Bay, we've been getting BODs as high as 700, and from Princeton area as high as 1041, 1050. So we are investigating and trying to find out the source where it is coming from. We've got a source control inspector who's had very good experience investigating that, but we still haven't been able to find out the source, but we'll definitely keep the board updated. Dan Child from Wastewater Management Specialist is working with us along with his consultant and helping us fix the process issues. And Dan is here right now, going to give a PowerPoint presentation and will explain it further. So over to Dan. Go ahead, Dan.
If I can share my PowerPoint. Everyone, it's nice to join you again. Oh, okay, how's this going to work? Oh, I got a problem. There it is. It's not coming up, is it?
No.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that the values from Princeton and Half Moon Bay are from the samplers which we have installed at these locations.
Okay, I don't know what's going on.
Well, that looks like more fun.
This is the best presentation we've had so far.
This my
Yeah, that's what I call a treatment plant.
What are you seeing?
Clean water.
Okay. My son. Oh, what have I got to do here? I've lost you guys.
I think this is right in line with our next item about a future project that maybe Sam could do with recycled water.
With no ocean outfall.
Exactly.
Do you want me to share, Dan? Are you having trouble?
Let me try one other thing here real quick.
Okay, otherwise I can share it on the PowerPoint that you sent me a few minutes back.
Yeah, for some reason I can't pull it up today.
Well, it's a great photo in the interim. I mean, it's a neat photo.
It's coming up. Okay, it says I'm sharing my screen. Okay, yeah, you get a great picture of my son and his daughter, my granddaughter. Why isn't this?
And that's what we were saying, is that should be one of our recycled water options for Sam.
Yeah, I agree. Why?
That's a big dam too.
It's a place called Joe's Valley. Okay, I don't know what's going on here. I can see it on my screen. Let's stop that share. Let's try it one more time. I apologize, guys.
You're able to do it. If Dan's not able to, you're able to do it, right?
Yeah, I can do that. From the email that he sent me, I can always try to do that.
That way you don't burn a gas.
Yeah, for some reason, it's just refusing to come up on mine. It comes up on my screen, but then, there it is right there.
Oh, that's it.
You see the actual PowerPoint?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
just tiny.
It's tiny. Try that.
You just have to maximize it. There
There
you
we
go.
go.
All right.
Okay, so you guys can see it now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Okay, well, Kishan kind of said some of the things I want to, but basically these extremely high BOD, which is biochemical oxygen demand, which I think you all know is a measurement of the amount of oxygen that the pollutants need, that the bacteria need to consume the pollutants out of the wastewater. And typically at SAM, you're running in the 350 to 400 range. We've seen numbers much higher than that, and I'll get into those. Basically, those, Kishan said, the plant's looking really good now. The weekly averages that are in your discharge permit are being met. The monthly average still has not quite been diluted out, but it should be any day at this point. But unfortunately, that means you had permit violations in both October and November, and probably will have at least one in December by the time we get this monthly average out of the way. As he said, he requested assistance from me, and I brought in Wet Technologies, which is a gentleman who's an extremely good process guy. We requested copies of the plant design criteria, and one thing that really baffled us was it was still labeled draft, and when we started getting into it, we found out that it was never completed back in 1996-97. We have no idea why, but both it and the O&M manual that is what the engineers provide for the operators to be able to know how they intended the plant to be operated, have significant sections missing regarding the design criteria and how to operate this plant. So we kind of had to back in the issues that we saw and try and figure out what the true plant capacity was and how the engineers anticipated it would be operated. And by the way, if you have any questions, I'm going along, please stop me and just ask the questions. So in early October, you saw some numbers as high as 1,900 and 940 and 1,100 entering the plant. As Kishan just mentioned, we're still seeing some high numbers out in the individual communities at times, but by the time they get to the plant, they're getting diluted down. However, we're still seeing upper 400s, 500s are really common, and we've seen some as high as 750. At the same time, we've had 3 or 4 days in the last couple of months that have been back down to the normal range in the mid 300s to 400s. So somebody out there, something is continuing to give us some fairly high numbers. One thing we've changed is we're required by our permit to sample twice a week. Due to this excursion from that level, we were required by the regional board to increase our sampling to as daily as much as possible. The lab could only do it 5 times a week just because of their collection of things, but we've been getting samples pretty much 5 times a week since about mid-October now. I also went back and did some research on, has this ever happened in the past? And we did have some high numbers back in August, 580, a 700, and 1100. And those occurred over a 3-week period in August. And then back in February and March, we had a couple of 500 and 640s, but they didn't seem to cause any trouble. They must have been just enough that they went through one time. And you might remember that Tim reported last time that when we first saw the samples that were high in early October, the plant seemed to be okay on the first one they saw, so they assumed that it was just a sampling error of some sort or a testing error and kept going. But by the time the next week's samples came in, the plant was upset, having trouble settling water or settling the solids, and had a real cloudy appearance to the water. So as I alluded earlier, in the design information, and I'm going to skim over this kind of stuff and not try to get in too deep on, on this side of it, but Sam typically sees about a 350, 400 number in BOD. When we backed into the design information based on the information that was available through this design report and backwards, we came up with it was designed for a 237 milligrams per liter for BOD and 216 for suspended solids. Those are pretty typical numbers of the 1970s and 1980s before water conservation became a big issue. These days, we're seeing the higher numbers in the 300 to 400 range, mostly because of water conservation. There's the same amount of pollutants, just not as much water carrying it through the pipes. The aeration basins, which are the key for removing the BOD, the plant has operated with just one aeration basin, which is Basin 3, which we refer to as a new basin. It was built in 1996. And they've been running on that for 25 years now. In the design information, there was no mixed liquor suspended solids information, no mixed liquor bottle suspended solids, which are both measurements telling you how much bacteria is available to consume the pollutants. F to M ratio is food to microorganism ratio. There's no information about that. No information as to the organic loading rates, how many pounds of solids you can handle per cubic foot, how much sludge you would develop, or how long you expected the bacteria to be in there. That's MCRT is mean cell residence time, which is how long of a life each bacteria theoretically has. So again, we backed into design numbers for these aeration basins and came up with 195 milligrams per liter, assuming we had 3 basins in operation, which would be 2 new basins and 1 old. Yes. Somebody have a question? Nope. Okay. So with 3 basins and 2 new and 1 old, which I'll get into in a minute, but it's a physical impossibility in the treatment plant. You can't actually do that. But that meant that the primary clarifiers only removed 18% of the solids of the BOD coming into the plant. Typically, you expect about 40% removal. So they assumed very poor removal in the primary clarifiers. And it resulted in 53 pounds of BOD per 1,000 cubic feet of aeration basin capacity with 3 of the tanks in place. The normal range is 20 to 40 pounds of BOD per 1,000 cubic feet. So they designed it extremely high loaded. That food to microorganism ratio as we were operating was at least a 0.9 and normal is 0.1 to 0.5. So we're double of the high range. 0.3 is really typical. And honestly, when we looked at it, it's like, how in the world are these guys actually been able to operate this place for the last 20 years? Because it is literally running in a range that it should not be able to do what it's been doing. So the design has some buffer built into it, which is a good thing. The one nice thing, the secondary clarifiers appear to be adequate size for the 15 million gallons per day peak wet weather flow that the plant's permitted for. We did not analyze the chlorine contact tanks or the solids handling processes with this upset. It didn't have anything to, no reason to for this particular process. So they've had challenges in the past, and there was an operation consultant 15 years ago and recommended that they change their process from a nitrification process, which is a higher level of process in the treatment plant because you remove ammonia when you nitrify. You convert ammonia to nitrate. And he recommended they go to what's called the carbonaceous, which means just removing the BOD. And so they went down to the 1 aeration basin, the extremely high aeration or the F to M ratio. The problem with that is it encourages the growth of what we call filamentous bacteria. And those are like real stringy bacteria that just kind of all interlock. And you need a little bit of that in there because it helps stuff bind together and settle when you get in the clarifiers. But if you have too much of it, it doesn't like to settle because it creates kind of a mat that wants to float. So The common treatment, if you get too much filamentous, is you chlorinate what's called the return activated sludge. Basically, chlorination of return activated sludge is the equivalent of chemotherapy to the treatment plant. You are killing off the bacteria. The problem with that is when you kill off good bacteria or bad bacteria, you also kill good bacteria that we need. And basically, this plant has been on a steady diet of chemotherapy for 20 years, and that answered the question how the operators were able to keep it running, but it's not good for the process. So we came in and designed a control strategy that was based on mixed liquor solids concentration. We raised it up to a more a level that better addressed the loadings coming into the plant. We shut off aeration basin number 3 and turned on the 2 old aeration basins number 1 and 2. The reason we did that is because those combined gave us slightly more aeration capacity than number 3 by itself. Ultimately, we'd like to have 3 and 4 both running, but 4 has never been outfitted. They built a tank and it sat empty for 20 years without equipment in it to be able to operate it. So we also implement what's called chemically enhanced primary treatment. Basically, we're adding chemicals to the primary clarifiers to settle the solids, get them out of there so there's not so much load going to the aeration basins. And like I said, we put the aeration tanks back, the old tanks back, got an F-dam ratio of about 0.3, lowered our organic rate to 42 pounds per 1,000 cubic feet by doing that, which is still heavily loaded. If you remember, we had 20 to 40 was our range. We're at 42, it's close, and we seem to be doing okay. And for about a month or about 6 weeks, we actually added chemicals to the secondary clarifiers to assist with the settling because those filaments would not settle well, and we could not get we were blowing solids out the top of the clarifiers, so we had to help them with that. As Kishan said, the plant is now stabilized and running well. However, we are moving into nitrification again. That is a good thing in a lot of ways. It'll produce a better effluent. It'll give more stability to the treatment process. If another load does come in that's heavy, it tends to give it a little bit more of a buffer to be able to handle those heavy loads. The downside is it does use more air. Luckily, I guess you'd say that is the treatment plant, the blowers are too big. You couldn't turn them down enough when we were just doing carbonaceous. So they were literally wasting air. Now we're not wasting that air anymore. We're actually using it, but it may ultimately result in slightly higher electricity costs for a little bit more air. The second thing is it does require alkalinity to nitrify. Based on the numbers we've been able to get, it looks like we've got enough alkalinity to typically handle the loading of the ammonia when we nitrify it. But if we have a rainstorm or something like that with a lot of water coming in, rain tends to be very acidic. We've all heard of acid rain. It forms carbonic acid as it comes through the system, and it lowers the pH. So we're setting up now to be able to add a chemical to the water to give us more alkalinity and keep that pH and help the plant work better. So as far as findings and recommendations, Kishan alluded to this. We need to hire a specialist to investigate those potential sources. We got some information today, and Rick, I'm really sorry to hit you with this one, but it looks like breweries could be one of our really good potential guys. So we'll be knocking on your door next week. The little guys have nothing to worry about, but the big breweries could be a source of this issue. They have definitely got high BOD sources there. So we need to look at getting together and finding these guys and then helping them. I mean, this is not something somebody's doing on purpose. It's something they're not educated on, and we need to educate and make sure they know what to do. So the plant's running well. We're meeting our requirements. Everything's going good there. Nitrification is going to produce you a great effluent. definitely recommend in the future, and the sooner the better, that we put the equipment in aeration basin 4 so that we can operate that. Once it's up and running, I think we should empty number 3 again and make sure that it's been in service for 25 years with no maintenance, and the expected life of the air diffusers in those tanks is only 7 years. So you've got your money's worth out of those diffusers. One thing you need to be aware of is if we get real high loadings consistently again, if we get 3 or 4 days of high loadings, it will throw this plant back into non-compliance. So we need to make sure that we're getting things in place to be able to address that. The lack of completed design criteria and the information that goes along with that, knowing the true capacity, the ratings of the plant, how they figured the actual flow capacity of this plant's very questionable. Typically, when a facility, they require you to take the largest.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm on a Zoom meeting with the sewer agency right now. Is there any... Are you going to be home tomorrow at 1 in the afternoon? I can be, sure. I got a phone call tomorrow at 1, so I'll try to call you then. Okay. I don't know if you're going to but I'll try to call you there tomorrow. Okay. Or actually, even after tomorrow, so I'll try to call you then. Okay.
If directors could please, if all on the call could please mute their line while they're listening, that'd be really helpful.
Okay. So anyway, redundancy in the plant is an issue as far as the ratings go. It's rated to handle up to 15 MGD, but if you take these as typically required, the largest of each process unit out of that criteria. So I would be really interested on how they arrived at that. The assumptions that we made assumed that we were going to have aeration tanks in service, and right now we only have about half of what we really should have. So getting those tanks in service again is important. And I guess my only real recommendation at this point is, I'm an operator at heart. Chuck from Wet Technologies is an operator at heart. We have a lot of experience dealing with this, but I would really recommend that you bring in a highly qualified firm with some deep wastewater design and operational experience, people that they can double check and review the facility from an engineering standpoint and verify what its true capacity and what the operational scheme of the plant should be from an engineering standpoint, not just an operational standpoint. And with that, I get questions, and thank you for listening to me. I hate to end the slide so I may never get it back.
Yes. I wonder, what have we done so far to contact the breweries?
Tim, do you want to respond to that?
So we've had before Tim responds, we've had the source control inspector who's very well experienced in the source control part of it, visit all the establishments. He's actually doing his annual inspection. And starting tomorrow, he's going to do more intense by actually meeting with breweries and then trying to find out what process they are doing, whether they've made any change in their process or anything abnormal has happened in the past few weeks. Tim, would you like to add something more?
No, I mean, like you said, Norm's talked to a few of them. It seems like what they're doing, from what he's been able to ascertain from his visits, that they're doing everything they're supposed to be doing. But like Dan alluded to, we don't know for sure. It might be something that they're doing that they just don't realize is creating a problem. And it's not just the breweries. There's a couple of distilleries in the Princeton area also There's some other areas where we've gotten some high hits on the samplers we have out in the field. So we're following up on all possible leads. It would be nice to say that, yeah, we know exactly where it's coming from, but the reality is we just don't right now. We just don't.
And it could take months or even longer to find out, to really backtrack it to who it is. But the fact that you're getting some from Half Moon Bay, some from Princeton, it seems to me that you've got some kind of an industry that's fairly consistent and spread in various places. And, you know, breweries are fairly common throughout that area. So it'd be pretty easy for them to be it. You know, at one time we thought maybe the leachate from the landfill was part of the problem. We still haven't totally ruined or taken that off the list. There's a couple of fish processing facilities out in Princeton that could also be high BOD. So it's a process of elimination, and it takes time. And the good part is if somebody stops, but it's also the bad part because then it's hard to track back to them. So it's a challenge. But the person that they have going out and visiting these places, I know him personally, and he is extremely good at it. And he's very friendly. People like him, and he's not confrontational. He's really good about working with people and making sure that he educates them and figures out what's going on, and hopefully they'll find out and be able to put a stop to it.
Any more questions? Oops. Any more questions? Sorry. Matthew.
It says on page 75 in the staff report that as of the 2nd of December, the plant is not within discharge requirements, the weekly average that's required. And is your information more current, and that means it is now in compliance?
That is correct.
Great.
Side it is, yes.
Yep, especially with the average, the moment we get one high number, everything goes out of hand.
Oh, yeah.
That's the reason. Otherwise, one day is high and the entire week goes out of hand.
So Kishan, that's okay. That's all right. We have a closed session item where I can ask, there may be some opportunities for additional questions to be asked.
I have one quick question, and that is, has there been some change in state law on breweries or distilleries or food processing? Generally, that happens on January 1, that would make this all of a sudden a problem. This is something I've never heard of before. And to have this show up all of a sudden, is there some industry change or state law change that would help point us in a direction?
I'm not aware of any.
You're not aware of any, Jeremy. Maybe that's something that the inspector can be asking the various businesses that are visited. Is there a change in your process? Is there a change in what you're doing?
The kind of questions that he would be asking. The other thing that we probably haven't really brought up is, according to Tim, historically in the fall months, the treatment plants always had a rough period. They always just kind of associated it with the seasons changing and things changed. Could be that it's been going on for years, and this year we just got a really bad dose that brought it to our attention. We really don't know for sure. But definitely a question that Norm would be asking the breweries and anybody else he visits. And the breweries aren't the only ones he's going to be visiting, I'm sure. He'll be talking to a lot of people.
Okay. Any more questions from the board? Barbara.
I'd just like to say that this is a lot, especially the implications regarding the plant design and so forth, to absorb tonight. A lot of information we're getting at this meeting. I will look forward to continued reports, because it seems as if this is something that we need to understand more thoroughly. And in fact, I might want to come in and have a meeting and talk more about this. That's possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Deborah.
He was muted.
So What is the likely constituent that might be precipitating this problem?
Well, from the breweries, I started to put this in the report and thought, no, I'm not ready to do that yet. But just beer by itself, beer has a BOD of between 75,000 and 180,000 all by itself. So with the darker ales being higher and the lighter lagers being lower. So, you know, if somebody had a bad batch or something and decided to dump it down the drain, it would cause huge issues. Even the yeast is you know, very high at up to 120,000. And even little things like glue, if they had some glue that they used to put labels on. Glue is typically in the, what does it say, 30,000 number. And I don't know what you use defoamer. I'm not a beer guy, but defoamer is 420,000 parts per million. So there's lots of things there in the fish industry, if they're cleaning fish and, you know, that type of stuff. And BOD comes from any organic source that exerts an oxygen demand. So anything that's organic that can be broken down can create that kind of a load. And,
So kind of like sugars?
oh yeah, yeah, sugar, alcohol, those all are very high organic loads.
Just a recap of what I presented in the last board meeting. I did mention, let me just pull it up. Yeah, do you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay,
It's kind of lost in the, there we
there
go.
we go.
Yeah, this was what was presented last time, where we said that high strength BOD values could come from breweries, distilleries, and wineries. They could possibly originate from bad batches of product. First rinse of processed tanks, they could be doing their rinsing or cleaning on one particular day in the week, like say every Wednesday or every Thursday or something like that, or over the weekend, and that could trigger it off. So during the week, we may not have any issues, but one particular day it might trigger off, or they might be doing some change. And of course, fertilizers, frozen fisheries. Leachate, we know for sure that that is not causing any problem because we stopped leachate almost a month and a half back, and we're continuing to have problems. So.
Could it come from potentially like cleaning solutions or solvents, you know, with COVID and everything? There's
Right.
a lot of alcohol being used and
Yep.
sanitizers and, you know, stuff like that. I'm just wondering if maybe something like that might contribute to it. It seems like it's coinciding with, you know.
Alcohol, it depends on the type of alcohol. Like rubbing alcohol is more of a disinfectant. It kills the stuff. It doesn't produce as much of a biological loading. But you know, antifreeze is a notorious bad when it's got alcohol in it and can. So just depends on what's going on. And you know, I want to indicate that this is definitely breweries. I just think they're definitely a strong potential at this point. The fish places, the leachate we have shut it off and things have gone down, but the leachate did have some things that we feel like we need to investigate before we allow leachate back into the plant due to its high COD comment, which is chemical oxygen demand and what it's doing. So there's a long ways to go. The nice thing tonight is the plant is back in compliance. It is running very well. We've got through this rough part, but we need to be thinking about the next time and doing the preparations, like we pointed out, to try and identify what it is and what we can do at the plant to make sure the plant's as sturdy as possible.
So that's a good way to end this item.
I have a question. I have a
Oh,
question.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Now I see your hand.
That's all right.
Deborah.
Is there any way that we could do testing closer to the source?
Tim is
Can
doing
you test at the brewery, for instance?
What we've done and what's typical in this is you start with the samplers and they have 4, is it 4, Tim?
Yeah, we have 4 out in the field currently.
Samplers out in the field, and as you eliminate a line, say one line is constantly good, you take that sampler and you move it closer down a line that might have a indicator that it's a problem line, and you just keep moving down and down. Sometimes you go down and all of a sudden it gets good again, and that means you may have passed whoever was causing your problem. And it's, like I said, a process of elimination of just gradually closing in that net to where you can find out where it's coming from. And that's the process that Tim's in with these samplers right now.
Yeah, right now I think we've located the sampler in one of the manholes at Princeton, which gets all the sewer from 3 different streets. They all merge and then come into this manhole. So that then now we can start going closer to the probable source. That's where we started from.
And this happens every year in the fall, apparently.
Well, no, that's not to this degree. Not to this degree. We've had upsets, but yeah, I mean, just for example, when we had the 1900, and I contacted the lab because initially I was like, there's no way in hell we had a 1900 influent BOD. That's off the chart. That's just unheard of, and that's why we thought that. In fact, I even reached out to the city of South San Francisco and the Millbrae wastewater treatment plants to ask them, and they said we've never gotten anything that high. I mean, they've gotten like BODs of 1,000 on their influence, but those were not frequently, and the frequency that we've gotten these has just been sort of crazy. So could it be the fact that there's more microbreweries popping up here and there? It's possible. I know they've had that problem up along the Mendocino coast with a lot of little microbreweries that popped up around there, and they had some issues at their treatment facilities. So that's kind of why we were leaning towards that as a possibility. But I mean, like I said, it's a process of elimination, and we just slowly back down and we tighten the net. That's all we can do.
Yeah, I'm looking at an article right now in Water Technology dated November 23rd, reducing the microbrewery load on public, treatment works. And it's talking about their role in BOD, affecting BOD.
Yep.
It's very interesting.
Timely.
Barbara Dye?
So,
Barbara, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. If we were to determine that a particular brewery was the source of this problem, do we have recourse? Can we work with, are there ways they can modify what they're doing to reduce their impact? Do we have options to say, you can't keep doing this? I mean, it seems as if it's a really big extra cost, then there's issues there. What recourse would we have in that case? Can we just work with them? Are there things they can do to reduce it?
Definitely things they can do, and I don't want to get too far into that because I'm sure Jeremy will jump in here and rip my lips closed.
Yeah, I guess maybe I shouldn't have. Yeah.
But you actually have an obligation by the Clean Water Act to make sure that you don't violate your permit. And there are what they refer to as industrial pretreatment standards that if you have events like this one that can be applied to you and force you as an agency to do things. And that goes back to your local sewer use ordinances and all that type of stuff you have to get into. So other than more technical than that, I'm going to leave to Jeremy because I don't want to cross the line.
Yeah, most agencies are going to have a sewer use ordinance. So SAM's a JPA, right? So they it's a little bit different than your if it was directly run by one of your agencies, but you can have a sewer use ordinance, and that's how you specify what are the terms of service. What are you allowed to put into the system? And the idea, an EPA requires that, and the reason you have it is to prevent upset, among other reasons.
Well, this sounds like it's worthy of a whole lot longer discussion.
Yeah.
I have one question, and that is, have you looked, first of all, perhaps COVID has made this a particularly rough year. And maybe businesses are doing some different kinds of planning, or maybe they're trying to keep costs down. And so there are different kinds of actions on the part of employees or businesses that are causing this problem. The other is to talk to the Fishermen's Association maybe and see when the different seasons start and see if there was a big fish haul in. I know crab season for commercial was postponed because of the whales. And maybe they were bringing in other fish to supplement their income, and it was going through a treatment process for whatever. But I think this is sounds like a good Sherlock Holmes kind of mystery, and we're going to have to follow it closely. But thank you very much for all of this information. I have some other questions, but I would prefer that we could schedule this as a closed session item at our next meeting, because some of the questions I have, and that I believe some of the other folks on this board might have, might be better discussed where we know the answer, and then we can ask the question in public. But there are some questions that, given the litigious nature of so many things right now, that we don't want to get involved in.
I would just say, oh wait.
There were some comments in Dan's PowerPoint that left me going, and I will talk to you about those later, Dan, or maybe the whole board would like to. But again, I'm not sure it's necessarily closed session, but I'm not sure it's not either. So maybe I should talk to you first, Jeremy.
Well, I mean, I think if the board is concerned that there's a significant likelihood of litigation being initiated against the agency, which I could, given recent events, is certainly a concern. There's an ongoing court-approved or court-supervised settlement. So I think we can talk about this potential liability issues in the context of the existing noticed closed session item.
Good.
I'm comfortable with that.
Good. Thank you very much. Let's do that for our next agenda item then. I'm sorry, for our next meeting, for a closed session agenda item.
Okay.
Any more questions, anyone? Seeing none, this is an information and update, so I don't believe it requires any action. So we would move on to item C. Discuss adding a distributed waste processing plant system as an alternative for the single plant rebuild of the plant. And that I asked to have this item on the agenda. I will say it is, I've been following recycled water and package treatment plants and things like that for a long time. And given the kind of costs we're looking at and environmental problems in the not too distant future, geologically speaking, I'm thinking we might want to be looking at alternatives to simply rebuilding this plant. Keishan, you might have more to say, but my thought was that perhaps we could form a committee to work on this, just to be able to get information for the board, so the board doesn't have to sit through these, what I consider fairly fascinating subjects, but others might not be as interested in.
I'd like to be part of that.
Oh, good. We can have fun. Because I just think that there's a whole lot of changes in technology since this plant was built, and a whole lot of things changing And so I think we should be exploring it. And so Keisha, why don't you take it over from me, and we can throw it out to the board then.
Sure, we can
Rick,
do that.
I see you too.
Yep.
Yeah, I got a whole bunch of stuff to go on this to help launch this in a direction. I don't know if Kirsten wants to go first, or my original intent was not to say we need a distributed system, but the intent was to form a committee here of engineers, board, and general managers if they want to join and look at all the alternatives. I think this BOD problem, well, first of all, when Kishan first mentioned we had a serious BOD problem, I immediately thought of the board of directors. So I was kind of relieved to find out it was a bacteria problem instead. But, you know, everybody knows this plant's over 40 years old. This BOD issue that we're currently have could be aging equipment. The staff and the board and all the agencies are doing a great job of keeping SAM running, but pipes are getting old. You've seen all of Kishan's pictures of things rusting all over the place. San Mateo County has got this on our plants on their danger list for sea level rise. I have no concept what building an entire new SAM would cost, but I would like to see that committee launched to get people together and start, because we do a good job of keeping SAM running, but I think a major, even more important role of the board is to say, what is SAM going to look like in the future? In 2040, we're supposed to have no outfall. Okay, we haven't even talked about that yet. So I think our role should be, you know, none of us are going to be here probably in 2040 on the board anymore. But I think one of the best things we can do for the coast side is to lay out a plan for SAM and start thinking about plan B, because my personal feeling is what we've got now won't last 40 years. And if we can get a committee going, I got other stuff to talk, but let Kishan jump back in.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. I think we will form a committee. I will send out an email to all of you, as well as you could nominate your respective engineers also, along with the respective agency, and then we could form a committee and have a kickoff meeting very soon, so that we would have marching instructions as what needs to be done next. That could also be a forum where we could exchange all technical information, latest developments, so that we could concentrate on other things and do a little bit of brainstorming too. Yep. Thank you for initiating this idea, Chair Slater-Carter.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I see you, Rick, just a minute. I'm thinking that if there's a great deal of interest, maybe the committee could work to have a special kind of workshop that the public could participate in, and that we could just lay out some of the basics that we're going to explore. There is so much exciting change going on in the wastewater industry, and for those who are interested, we could maybe get a tour of the Pacifica plant, which is about the same age as our rebuilt plant, and see how it's going. It doesn't have an outfall. It has rehabilitated a creek, Calera Creek, I think it was, that goes into the ocean with a wetland over by the quarry. And there are quite a few new kinds of technologies that are up there, and the price is going down. So it's something I'd like for us to be talking about. Rick, I saw your hand was up.
Just one more side thought, and I'll shut up for a while. There are massive ramifications from this that I hope are apparent to everybody. An awful lot of our problems are pipes here. We have problems with IPS and leaking pipes. And what would happen if we had a system let's just say, doesn't have an IPS? What are the ramifications for things like local lawsuits if all of a sudden the IPS goes away?
Oh,
So-
there's lots of opportunity there.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff that can save us millions and millions of dollars here and build a solid treatment system for the whole coastside and still keep everybody employed. I just think it's imperative on this board to just jump in and start doing this.
Good. Well, and Keishan, maybe you could send a note out to every one of the board members. A committee, an ad hoc committee doesn't need to post meetings and so on, but if there are more than 3 people who are interested in being on this committee, then maybe we could just figure out how to do them as special meetings, and so that everybody could participate, and do them more as workshops rather than formal meetings. I just think there's so much exciting stuff going on, and some people might attend for 1 or 2 and go, oh, ho hum. But I know Rick and I have been talking about this for years. And so I'd like Rick to be able to participate too. And I'm sure Matthew has ideas, and Barbara, as well as Deborah Penrose and Deborah Ruddick. So and our managers too. I mean, they're going to be telling us, oh, we can't spend this much money, and we can be talking about other things at the same time. So this is wide open at this point, but Deborah, I am so glad to hear you're excited about it, and I can see that we need to hurry up because some people have been up very early this morning. So we can move on.
One more quick thing about beer processing. As a disclaimer, my beer brewing up here has nothing to do with the BOD problem. All my brewing stays entirely on my property or in bottles with friends. So I'm not part of the problem.
Hey, Barbara. Oh, and you are?
Matthew's been trying to talk, but I don't think he knows his arm is disappearing.
No, I don't see his arm at all.
There you go.
Oh, there you go, Matthew. Okay, go for it, Matthew.
Following up a little on what Rick just mentioned about there are lots of options down the road for treatment for the entire coastside. I would like a simple definition and comparison of what is a distributed waste processing plant, and how is it different than what SAM operates now?
Well, what we have is sort of a 19th century concept of a single treatment plant, and all of the flow goes to this single plant. And that's how they did, for instance, up until recently, recycled water. And they'd take the recycled water out of the plant and then run these miles of purple pipes up and down the roads and out to places. It's been a concept that has been worked on, and 10 or maybe more years ago, when I was up at a recycled water conference in Seattle, they were talking about recycled water package treatment plants that they could have distributed out of within a community, and so that it didn't take all these long purple pipes to get the water to where it was going to be used. And now they've been doing it in smaller venues because of the state laws and environmental and so on, that they have waste treatment plants for dairies. And instead of shipping everything down to a major plant, it's handled right there. In New York, they do recycled water and even waste treatment in some of these larger multi-unit apartment buildings. So the thought that I had was, we should be looking at maybe going back to what it was, where Granada had its own treatment plant, Montera had ours, and Half Moon Bay had theirs. But this could be run under the auspices of SAM, and we could find ways to, within our groundwater basins, to reuse the water that is taken out of our groundwater basins, and to be able to keep it within the system. For instance, if Half Moon Bay treated its water, and it could put it in Pillarcitos Creek and help restore the headwaters of Pillarcitos Creek, or Granada could use its water to get a freshwater flow into the harbor, because the flow to the harbor has been reduced on Denniston. So these are just wild and crazy ideas that haven't been explored much. But instead of having a major line from Montera through and El Granada into the plant, maybe we have ways to keep our wastewater here and treat it. The systems with computers and technologies and so on are getting much more efficient. Anyway, sorry. So you have a question, Matthew? Are you waving goodbye?
Oh, well, yeah. Thank you, Catherine. I heard some of what you said, but I think I got my audio keeps going out.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think I got the gist.
Michelle had brought this up to me a year ago or so, and it's something I've been thinking about. What got me thinking it was more of a reality is the proposed expenses for rehabilitating the SAM plant, that with sea level rise and the influence that sea level rise may have on some of our lower lying sewer pipes and so on. This committee and this effort would be exploratory to really evaluate where SAM is going next. So it would be a comparison.
The term was used in the singular rather than the plural, so that made me wonder if it meant somehow distributed processing in a single site.
No. Okay. Michelle, I saw your hand.
I introduced Ronaldo Vezaliza to PMAC, and they've been working on looking at package plants. In particular, Catherine Peary. She used to be PMAC and now she's KPDO. But I asked her, do you know what a package plant was? And she went off like, yes, I do. And we want one here. And so I introduced Ronaldo to them, and they're already talking. And Pescadero themselves have gone pretty far down the line with the package plant and the microgrid idea. And so it looks like Ronaldo might be that missing link that brings everything together. So we might have our first package plant in Pescadero. And then also, Big Wave still doesn't have a sewer permit. They have water coming to them, but they don't have a sewer permit. So that might be another place in which a package plant might be appropriate. But thanks very much for you guys for even looking into it. It's very exciting. It is really actually fairly old technology. Ronaldo's been doing it for about 40 years, but it's new to the US, so it'll take some marketing and some education. But I think it's a good idea. So thanks.
Good. Thank you. So Keishan, you and I and the rest of the board can sort of work on this via email and people's schedules and so on. And we can thank you for hearing me out on this, gang. I appreciate it. General Manager's report, item 5.
Yeah, on the manager's report, before I get on to the report, I know it's not an agenda item, but I would like to bring it up and check if the board is willing to have a special meeting next week sometime. I can send a doodle poll, and the idea is to discuss the MRSCO project, whether the board would like to move forward or not, because we could have an advantage if we decide earlier, because the lender has got his closing date for the interest rate as December 31st or December 28th would be a little too late if Sam decides to move forward. So I would like to send a doodle poll and check people's availability for early next week to have a special board meeting. And other than
So
that,
that's a yes.
okay.
So please send it.
Okay, I'll send a doodle poll and check people's availability. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
Now the manager's report.
any questions on the manager's report? I think we've covered by and far everything else, what happened in the month of October. But staff is here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Seeing no questions.
No, Director Dye.
Director Dye, yeah.
It must be the problem, these internet problems, because she is frozen on my screen.
Oh no, hello, I'm here. Well, I have a lot of questions on all the problems at the plant that are not necessarily VOD related. Like the rotary drum thickener is tripping out, and I need to know what it means that go back to the wasting to the headwork and filament control and stuff. Is there could I possibly sorry, I didn't have a chance before this because I was away to ask these questions, but I would like, it seems as if there's a lot of issues going on right now at the plant with just the boiler failing again. The ferric didn't pump. I can't believe the ferric's not pumping. It just, if you read the report, it seems like there's a lot of problems going on right now, and I'm troubled by that because it just something I think we should be aware of. And
yep, some of the problems are associated with the BOD, but yes, others are isolated problems. And Tim, would you like to add something more to that?
That's what I was going to say. I don't know if you want me to. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of stuff there, and some of it's just the equipment. Some of it's the original design of the equipment, and it's been in constant use for multiple years, and without we did cut corners in the original design, so that taxes some of the equipment even more. The boilers are a fine example of that by not having a gas scrubber of sorts on that. That's the increased problem with the boilers that we seem to have frequently is carbon buildup. We get carbon arcs inside the boilers. I mean, depending on how far down this rabbit hole do you want me to go? Or
well, the rotary drum thickener is quite new, right?
The rotary drum thickener is new, yes.
And it started tripping out, and it's causing ongoing problems.
That one was kind of problematic. That actually that was an electrical problem. Yeah, we thought it was a drive. We thought it was the Euro drive because we have a similar type of drive on the filter belt press. And it turned out that it wasn't the Euro drive, but it was making similar noises that the Euro drive on the belt press makes. That's why we thought it was that. But it did, in fact, turn out to be an electrical issue. So once we finally got the electrical issue ran down, then we were able to get that up and going. In the interim, while the RDT was down, we did have to waste back to the headworks, which is a real bummer because when we waste to the headworks, like I've told you guys before, the secondary sludge is not as thick and it's not as dense as the primary sludge, so it settles differently, and it just when you combine it into the primary clarifiers, it just doesn't settle out as well. So that just creates other treatment obstacles that we need to overcome in the daily operation of the treatment facility and the process. And of course, that all happened at about the same time that we got these high BODs just to compound everything else. So it was, yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is my admiration for you with dealing with all these problems. And I know we're taking a look at the ongoing, needs for the facility. But when I look at the number of different problems that seem to be the result of equipment failure, it troubles me from my point of view. So I'm going to actually hopefully talk a little more so I can understand what these all are. But I guess it's really good that you've kept things running even with this, assorted major, one thing failing after another, it seems, in the last month or so. So well done.
Oh,
Well,
sleepless nights.
Yeah, and we've been doing that for years.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions?
Okay, well, moving on then to attorney's reports.
We're running there's a couple items with COVID. I think Christopher should have provided the board a memo on that. Running a little short on time, so I don't think I'm going to go into a lot of detail, but there have been some new changes with the state regional orders and also Cal OSHA. If anyone has any specific questions, those can be directed to me or Christopher. But since we are getting a little short on time, I think I'll probably just leave it at that unless people have questions.
Thank you. Director's reports. Looking for hands. Rick.
I think we should probably do a quick report on Montero Mountain.
Oh, please.
Yeah, we had two great citizens who years ago went up and were trying to protect butterflies up on the Montero Mountain. And then another one of our local citizens who hikes up there all the time was confronted with bulldozers scraping the top off of Montero Mountain and said, oh, that's strange. Took tons of pictures and brought it back to Montero board meeting and had huge discussions. The quick net result of all of that was our general manager, Clemens, contacted the deputy director, I guess it is, of SFPUC, who somehow owns the property on the top of the mountain, and said, hey, let's get a meeting together with a bunch of people on top of Montero Mountain. And they did. They actually showed up. They had graded an entire, almost a highway up to the top of the mountain. They're going to put in a huge tower right on top of the peak where everybody historically hiked up to. But the quick
and fence it off. And they took off the top 7 feet and a survey marker from the top of Montero Mountain.
From the good old days. And the net result was, I would say, amazing beyond my expectations. SFPUC, this is, San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, agreed to freeze the project until next year. They've agreed to redesign the project to move the tower X number of feet off where the top of the mountain was, because that doesn't really affect anything. They're going to rebuild that peak, which everybody hiked up to, because that gives you views of both the bay and the ocean. It's the highest point on San Francisco Peninsula. And I believe they're negotiating public access to the whole thing permanently. So it was massively successful, I think, and thanks initially to a bunch of local citizens who just said, hey, something bad's happening here. And the community got together, and I think we solved a big problem. And it was really a big win for everybody.
Yes.
Excellent.
Kudos.
Yes. And so time will tell, but if you want to read the article, it is on Coastside Buzz, and you can read more about it. Any more director's reports? Seeing none, Christopher, would you like to give us an update, a brief update on what's going on with COVID? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Sure, no worries. Thank you, Madam Chair Slater-Carter. Good evening, directors. In terms of COVID, there's been some new development. Shortly after Thanksgiving holiday, the Cal OSHA put out a new set of regs that talks about how employers have to comply with a new set of Cal OSHA regulations. It's pretty extensive. I've had a chance to go over some of the major high point with Keishan. The good news is Sam's already doing 80% of what has been prescribed in the new set of CAOSHA regs. And so even sort of before COVID, we've been doing most, if not all of it. And at this point, a lot of the steps are more procedurals in nature. For example, if there is what's deemed a multiple or major outbreak in the workplace, then there are some reporting procedures that we have to do with local public health on top of everything else that we would be doing already with staff. And so this is just an affirmation in terms of the efforts that Sam has taken in terms of protecting our employee health during this time. It's quite fortunate that Sam's had no workplace outbreak whatsoever. And that is really, kudos to all the staff and the general manager for their hard work and for also complying with all of the guidance that we've put out to employees in considering all the federal, state, and local guidelines. And compared to some of my other public agencies, Sam is doing extremely well, and we want to stay on that track. So between Jeremy, Kishan, and I, we'll be working on the additional steps and procedures and communicating that to the employees. But otherwise, that is kind of the latest curveball in terms of COVID-19 in the workplace.
Well, thank you very much for staying on top of it and helping keep us on the right track, which keeps changing and taking right angle turns. So we deeply appreciate that. Okay, moving on, there is an attachment with item 8, topics for future board consideration. If board members or members of the public have items of interest, please contact Keishan. We're going to convene in closed session, so PCTV and those who don't belong in closed session need to sign off. Thank you. Sorry, Deborah, you have to stay.
We get a